Welcome back, guys. I'm sharing the Hazel Miner story, and I drove an hour away. I drove to the little town of Center, North Dakota. It's a good hour from my house. And so here's how, it's kind of a long story, but here's how it worked out. So I have been playing for a while. That way I like lots of honey in my tea, guys, so don't spare the honey. So I didn't know where to start with connections, you know. I wanted to connect with the locals there that knew where the Miner farm was, where the schoolhouse was, all those things, you know, where the sleigh tipped over, everything, all the, you know, the locations, you know, where history happened. So I called the courthouse. I said I would like to see the museum there in town that has some of Hazel's artifacts and things like that, you know. And they said, well, you have to set up an appointment. You got to set up an appointment. I said, well, how do I do that? Well, here's Judy's number. And so I called Judy, and she says, well, when are you planning to come down? I said, oh, I don't know, you know. Today? I don't know. She said, well, I was kind of late for the day. But how about you come down on Friday? They're actually going to be sharing her story in the public school in Center. And some of her relatives are going to be there to have connections with her. I said, oh, how cool. And so I drove down there on Friday, and it was pretty cool to learn a lot of the backstories of this, you know, and of course the whole heroic story of Hazel Miner, and then the stories behind the scenes of the movie and such. So that was really, really cool. Sorry, guys. I had to clear up a lot of space in my files because the camera wouldn't allow me to record anymore. So we're back, and my tea is cold now, but it's still good. I went to the high school. Then Judy showed me the historical society which she runs, and there's a lot of cool artifacts in there. Could have spent a lot more time in there, but I wanted to cover the Hazel Miner story and do it justice, so to speak. And so I wanted to focus more on that than anything else. And so Judy showed me around to all the locations. The original schoolhouse, it's now been rebuilt twice and turned into a house. But we did drive by and I filmed the location. You couldn't see much. There's a bunch of trees around it. And she said the guy isn't very cooperative with them and allowing people to view it. So we couldn't view it at all. We just drive by and this is the location. And same with the Miner farm. There were no, there were no buildings left. But they knew about approximately where the house was, and I filmed that. And so that was really cool, just being in those spots and you know, see how surreal it was to be there and think what happened almost 106 years ago. So yeah, I'm so excited. I mean, I want to cover a lot of stories like this. I want to be a historian and a traveler. You know, just doing life. You know, like you know, working around the house. You know, but that being a historian is definitely a big part of it because I love these inspiring stories of hardships that people have dealt with. You know, and. You know, what makes this story so unique is the fact that there were 70 people trapped in that blizzard in 1920, and the only ones that survived were the Miner children. That's because Hazel took her coat off, wrapped her two younger siblings in her coat, and she lay on top of them, and it saved their lives. I know they did have some frostbite, but Hazel herself died of hypothermia, and so that's it's a very heartbreaking story. There was a family up by Ryder, which is north of here. They lost all 4 boys in the blizzard, you know, and so you'll probably catch on to some of that in the video as well. I just wanted to cover that. But how exciting! I love doing that. That was the first story I wanted to film on my YouTube channel, was the Hazel Miner story, and so I was so glad to have to get to do it. You know, even though it was a cold, snowy kind of, well, it wasn't much for snow, but it was a cold, windy day, and I about froze my hands off. You know, crawling in and out of the car and setting up my tripod for every shot, and taking selfies and such like that, but it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Now this week's video is going to be a little long. It's probably going to be over 20 minutes long. I'm sorry I couldn't make it any shorter. It's just that much to film. I have, in this week's video, I will show the Hazel Miner story, and just as far as the what happened with that. And the next week I'll show more of the movie, and more about the movie, and then also the Historical Society, the locations, things like that, you know, that we drove to. So yeah, it'll probably be 2 to 3 videos, you know, by the time I get everything out there. It's just a lot of footage. It was a lot of areas to cover, and but it was so fun. And the people you get to meet, I got a picture with Hazel's great nephew. I mean, how cool is that? How cool is that? That was a big deal for me, you know. Yeah, not this video, or this week's video is going to be all about the Hazel Miner story, and not about the housework, but maybe here in a couple of weeks or something we'll get back on you know, life around the house and such, and so we'll see how it goes. But I'm really excited. It was a really big deal for me. I was having the time of my life. So thank you, and God bless.
If you can, come to the school, which was east of Center. Come to the school, and we're going to go look for the kids. Well, it was still blowing the next morning. It was blowing hard. And what they did is first of all, Rufus said he was really surprised because there's a whole group of people from Center that came out to that area too. And they came out they were all in a wagon pulled by mules. That was the only way they could get through that. They were the old mule train, and they came out there. And luckily, somebody brought a lot of clothesline. Now you wonder, why would people bring clothesline to a search party? Well, it was so bad, the blizzard, that when they went out starting to look, they left the animals down in the barn by the school. They took off, they tied one person to the other, and they went along that several hundred feet. And they tied one to the other, to the other, to the other, and they walked the area between the school and the Miner farm. And as they walked, they put the leader of the group, his name was, and I gotta make sure I get this right, his name was Henry Clark. He was wise enough to bring a compass, and he was the only one who had a compass. Now, if you've never been in a bad blizzard, you really can't tell which is north, south, east, west. That's almost an impossibility. But what he did is he had brought his compass, and he was put in the middle. And everybody would be tied off so many feet. In fact, the blizzard was so bad that one person from one spot could not see the person next to him. And the only way, like Rufus said, that I knew that other people were there, he would tug on the clothesline, and if a tug came back, he knew there was somebody out there going in that direction. That was really difficult for us to understand. Now, I've been in some of those. It's scary because you cannot see more than maybe 5 or 6 feet. That is it. And it's really difficult to navigate. But Henry Clark had a compass. So they walked from the school to the Miner farm. Of course, they found nothing. They came into the house, and it was, they were really hoping that there was a notification that the kids were found. Well, they didn't. So they went back out, and from the school went in the opposite direction. Now, going in the opposite direction, they eventually, about, later on that morning, close to noon, they were walking, and somebody spotted the horse that was pulling that sled. Now, that sled had tipped over. And they went and looked at that. And there, pretty well everything was kind of broken up. And they looked around, and they finally, at that point, found the kids. And we know how the story ends, which is not very, very pleasant. But that was the life, and every year on that day, which was March 16th, Rufus kept thinking about that time. Because he walked along, they saw a mound in the snow, and of course, under that mound of snow was Hazel and her 2 siblings, Emmett and Meredith. And of course, they took them back to a nearby farm, and Emmett and Meredith survived, Hazel did not, and that was tough. Now, the day they found those 2 kids was Rufus Cohn's birthday. And he had found out later on that day that if this blizzard hadn't struck, Mrs. Cook had a big party planned for him for his birthday. That never happened. So every year, this was a reminder for him on his birthday, which is a happy time, but for him, it was clearly a tough time, because he would remember finding these kids in the snow. And Rufus, from the Buell area, he moved to South Dakota, and to his last days, because he died on the 18th of March, which would have been 2 days after that was many years later, in 1983. Every birthday, he remembered this time trying to walk through this North Dakota blizzard where he couldn't see a thing. And that's Rufus Cohn's story. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Wolf. Our next presenter here is going to be Jeanette Thomas. She's the daughter of, she was the daughter of my neighbor. Actually, Betty Shaner was a lady that we played pinochle with forever. She passed away 2 months ago, January 27th, so just a little over a month ago. And she's a fantastic lady. Actually, Jeanette Thomas is the daughter of Betty. Grew up just about 10 miles east of Center, and she's going to share a poem with you. So Jeanette, can I have you come forward?
Good morning, everybody. This poem is from A Prairie Heroine by Professor Arnold Marzloff, the German Department at North Dakota State University in Fargo. Hazel Miner, 1904 to 1920, Center, North Dakota. The 1920 Ides of March. I'm sorry. I really get into this because I just do. In 1920 Ides of March, in sudden stormy rage, had introduced a prairie lass upon a gloomy stage. The morning sun, so bright and warm, had sent her off to school. By noon, a blizzard icy blast had claimed its prairie rule. Her father saddled Kit and dashed to guide his children home, but somehow Maud, the children's pet, began to run and roam. They parted at the schoolhouse gate and didn't really know that Maud had lost her homing sense and floundered in the snow. And while they wandered in the storm, the sleigh fell on its side, and youthful Hazel knew at once that she must now preside. She wrapped her brother in her coach, her sister in her robe, and laid her body over them like a protective globe. They counted and they sang and prayed to keep themselves awake, and bravely waited for the sun or for the storm to break. The neighbors searched the fields and roads between the school and home, and risked their lives to save the lost from winter's catacomb. All through the night the prairies heard the shouts of prairie men. They braved the howling blizzard's blast to search the fields again. The 25 hours passed before they found the mound where Hazel and the little ones had hit the frozen ground. Her sister and her brother lived to tell how Hazel tried to save them from a snowy grave and how she slowly died. At center there's a monument, a tribute to the dead, an inspiration to the doll who lived by only bread. Somewhere there's a testament that's written in the snow, and those who love the prairie lass know how heroes grow. From prairie poems, poet dreams of prairie themes. The blizzard that day was quite extensive, North Dakota, and I think into Minnesota, and many people died then. But we all know that God took them all home and kept them warm and loved them.
Amen.
Next up, I'm going to kind of just give you a storyline of the Hazel Miner story. Is that Hazel was born April 11th, 1904 in Oliver County. She lived 2.5 miles north of the school, which is actually about 5 miles east of Center. Hazel was very good with children, and she wanted to become a teacher. Hazel and the children were lost in the storm. Their stories are in newspapers, magazines, the operas, now in a movie. The first story was written in the Sun Republican on March 18th of 1920. The children would walk to school if it was nice, ride their horse. Otherwise, in the winter, they would take a small sled that their father had built. It was called Jumper. Kit was the horse that was usually used on the sled, but on that day, for some reason, they took Maud. She was the one that was the farm workhorse. When they left the farm, the weather was okay. Later that great northern moved in just before noon. This was the storm that came in fast and hard. Hazel's dad went to school to get the children because the weather was between 15 and 20 degrees with wind blowing. He put the children into the jumper and told them to stay there so he could get his horse. There was a loud crack of thunder that scared Maud, and she took off out of the south gate, not the north gate, which was the direction to home. After the children traveled about 15 minutes, they knew that they were in the wrong place, that they could see no telephone poles. In those days, they did not have warm clothes like we have today. The children were out in the storm 24 hours. Other stories said 29 hours, but Emmett and Meredith suffered from frostbitten feet and other issues. This storm actually killed 70 people from North Dakota to Minnesota. We lost 35 in North Dakota. Hazel's story was the only one to have someone survive. Emmett and Meredith were found alive. In North Dakota, other families lost 4 sons in the storm and they got caught in the snow. One boy tried to walk home to get help. None of them were found alive. Many titles have been given to the story of Hazel. It's the girl against the blizzard, brave Dakota daughter, North Dakota pioneer heroine of the blizzard of 1920, the universal hero, angel of the prairie, which actually there's a book written with that title as well. After Hazel died, every country school in North Dakota had a picture of her in their building as a reminder of the hero that we all should be careful in our weather. The first story was written about Hazel in 1920 in the Sun Republican. The North Dakota Rec magazine called Hazel the farm girl from Center, who became one of North Dakota's most revered pioneer heroine, and they called her the farm girl from Center. In 1936, Hazel Miner Memorial was unveiled in the center courtyard. Several people wanted to give Hazel a memorial in center. Burton Wilcox and Governor L.B. Landa and many center residents joined in the donation. The governor had said the stone should be as tall as Hazel. There was over 1,500 people in attendance of that dedication. Another story that they said they had pennies to collect from children all over the state. And we have, there was 3 poems written about Hazel at that time. In 1961, the Reader's Digest had a story sent from Helen Graham from Ellendale, North Dakota, to put Hazel's story in their magazine due to the requests of so many people. They repeated the story, and copies were sent in Arabic, Germany, Danish, Norwegian, Finnish, Italian, Brazilian, Australian, and Portugal. She is now known as a worldwide hero. The Reader's Digest almost never printed the same story. In 1986, a guy by the name of Chuck Suki, who's planning to be here today, wrote a song about Hazel's death. In 1994, the Manly Mixers local homemakers club wanted to give Hazel a tombstone. They applied for a grant while they were waiting to get their money. They put the story in the paper. People started to send money at that time. A small gathering was held on the site, and Chuck Suki had played his song. In 1995, the history buff, Michael Moses, created a memorial cross to honor Hazel. This one is located by the monument in the courtyard, and the other at Hazel's grave site just west of center. They're made of iron horseshoes in the form of a cross. He later came back and added lanterns. In March 16th of 2020, on the 100th anniversary of Hazel's death, Oliver County and the state of North Dakota passed proclamations to honor Hazel with the Hazel Miner Day every year. There's been several things that we've done in the past few years here. In 2014, our first visitor from the historical building came from Minnesota. His grandmother went to school with Hazel, and she told him many stories and even brought the newspaper article. In 2015, Kevin Kramer wrote a book called The Angel of the Prairie. Kevin would donate 2 books to every school in North Dakota. Kevin was a teacher from Mandan and later moved to Florida, as he has written many books about the history of North Dakota. In 2024, Peter Voss and his son came to center. When Peter was 10 years old, he read the story of Hazel Miner in the Reader's Digest. In 1963, he told ladies at the courthouse that he waited 50 years to come to center to see Hazel Miner's items. April 4th of 2025, Marla from South Dakota works as a music teacher at Aberdeen College, and she worked in the summer camps in North Dakota. She heard the story of Hazel Miner and loved it. And they made an opera about Hazel Miner's life. In 2024-2025, Daniel Belinsky, the director of theater at the University of Mary, he learned about the local hero, and he wanted to make a movie, talk about her life, and how people had to work and survive in the weather of 1920. He made a point of telling the story of Oliver County. The film was put together in the Kmart building. Some items were loaned from the historical building. The movie was out in the fall of 2025 in Bismarck, and in 2026 the movie has now gone national. The movie is called Hazel, later called Hazel Heart. At the end of January, the movie had been released nationwide. To date, we have 42 newspapers and magazines telling the wonderful story of Hazel. The stories go on, not forgotten. We honor her love and her family. She did everything she had to without thought of the outcome. And the final quote is Mother Teresa said, "Not all of us can do great things, but we can all do small things with great love." We're going to go ahead and bring up Brock Holberg. He is the one that actually will tell a little bit about the movie and how they put that together. And we'll have Brock come forward.